And thank you everyone for being here. Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to be reading three pieces. I might read four actually for you guys. I'm going to start by reading my first piece, which is called The Structure of the World in a Human's View. Designed to make you give birth, give love, and give all of you. Structured to exploit you, to break your bones, and to burn you out. Organized to make the most out of a flourishing tree, as if we don't know what they do to trees. Cut them down. But she remains sweet and compassionate. She's filled with love and light. With drastic changes, she's uncomfortable. Nonetheless, she adapts. You listen, but also want to be heard. You want to be, and you want it all, and you want everything. Sometimes ignorant of your power, yet aware of the magic inside of you. Like a plant you pull to the sun, you represent light and energy. You have learned the nature of the peacock, how it stands in its true self, how it displays itself unapologetically. It blossoms knowing it has the power to do so, not from anyone, but from and for itself. You know playing small does not serve you, so you dream big and you create big. So that's my first piece. And my second piece is A Human's Power. It's a very short piece. Don't you understand, or have you forgotten so quickly? Your heart is different. You love differently, you feel differently, and you rise differently. My third piece is on page 79 of my already published book for Also Sensitive. It's actually a thought that I wrote just about like our gifts. And in my culture, Olua means God. So if you hear Olua, just know that it's God. It's a very short piece. Why do we usually underestimate our value and the gifts Olua has blessed us with? It's silly to think you're not powerful. You're not a powerful being walking on this land of milk and honey. It's us humans that use our hands to destroy this land and poison our hearts to make us believe that we aren't powerful. My last piece is on page 33 of my book. And it says, artists are very similar to scientists. And I read, they analyze and solve world issues with art. We're contemporary fairies, modern storytellers, different energies with the same message. Within, there's dark art and there's light. I'm surprised the world can't see that. Photographers, writers, singers, models, creators, actresses, however you identify as an artist, you are a fairy. Use your gift for good. Thank you so much for having me. That was amazing.
Oh, man. Wow. Get some snaps. Get some snaps. Ooh. Wow. Thank you so much, Tumi.
That was beautiful. Like, what a beautiful way to start our morning. So, hello everyone again. It's so nice to see you. If this is your first time, welcome to the Creative Mornings family. If this is not your first time, like, thank you so much for supporting us. We're happy you're here. We're moving towards the main event. I'm proud to present to you Chenny Xia. She's an experienced designer, technologist, and change maker. She played a leadership role in multiple design consultancies for over a decade before deciding to focus on one big, hairy challenge, which was creating a more equitable healthcare system.
Thank you so much for the introduction. So grateful to be here. So I wanted to share that in my last decade of being an innovation and design consultant, I can truly count on one hand the number of times where I worked on a project or initiative that actually resulted in implemented and sustained and change for the end user. And I'm sure that many of you here, that resonates with you and your work as well. So I wanted to share a point of view, my point of view on one reason why this happens. And I believe that it's because on our way to the Coliseum, when we are redesigning, when we are innovating how something works, we sometimes forget to undesign how we got here in the first place. So what I mean when I say undesign, well, similar to unlearning, undesigning means having a deep understanding of how we got to a particular design context, and also deliberately thinking about what we need to forget, what we need to stop, what we need to untangle, so that we can design something in a new and better way. And so to give a bit more color on what I mean, I thought I'd share the story of one of my last innovation projects before I decided to leave consulting. So one of the last projects I worked on, it was actually with a consortium of Canada's leading home care providers. And in case you don't know what home care is, it typically involves things like bathing, dressing, medication support for people who need services in their home. And typically that's because something happened in their lives. Maybe they have advanced dementia, or there was a stroke or a bad accident, something to that nature. And so as a part of this effort on the consortium, we were tasked with designing and developing a minimum viable product or service that would actually bring them a new revenue stream beyond what they had access to at the time. And so when I remember when I first came on this project, it had all the pieces that I look for in a, quote unquote dream innovation project. They had great intentions. We had really diverse stakeholder representation. It was a well-funded opportunity, had C-suite buy-in across multiple organizations, and a great team as well. It was myself, another designer on my team, and also 2 industry experts who worked in the field for over 25 years. So really, your stereotypical, good innovation project brief. And so together, we kind of threw everything at it. We did one-on-one design interviews, group research sessions, site observations, co-creation, service blueprinting, prototyping, early user testing, literally the whole process, every single part of the design thinking and innovation process we did. And we involved patients, families of patients, frontline staff, back office staff, managers, executives. But despite all of this, we ran up against some challenges. And so we ended up building a tech-enabled end-to-end home care system that really allowed for patients and families of those patients to be able to do things like choose who could go into their home, when the visits could happen, and also how the visits could be funded. And so when we opened up patient intake during our beta testing session, we had, I think it was 3 patient referrals that came in within the first 48 hours. Yet to our surprise, none of the companies that were part of the consortium were actually able to consistently deliver care to any of those patients. So what got in the way? Again, we had support from leadership. We had all of the stakeholders involved in the entire process. They co-created this thing with us. But really what got in the way was status quo. For example, staff were living in 2 worlds at the same time. It was the old world, what existed, right? They were focusing on managing and delivering government contracts. And also we were trying to get them to focus on the new world, which for us, we developed something that allowed them to listen to the needs of patients and working with them to truly find a personalized solution. But they couldn't make any space, any time for the new without saying no to some things that they were already doing before. And that context changing, that context shifting that they were doing was really challenging. And also what we were proposing required a completely different mindset. So despite us trying to troubleshoot and support throughout, it became really evident that if we were going to have a chance at success, that we had to either magically create capacity in their lives and in their schedules in some way, or we need to hire a dedicated team on both coordination and delivery, which in the end wasn't really what the execs signed up for when we first started this project. So in summary, the weight and influence of status quo was simply too heavy for any sustained change to take place. And I was gutted because I just spent the last full year listening and crying and co-creating with families. Anyone who's here with us today who's had to coordinate home care for a loved one before knows how much of a redesign this whole system needs. And so for me, I thought I was letting them down. And so this project really solidified something for me. And it was that there's this inner knowing that happened where I realized, well, if I'm going to find the answer to this, I actually think I need to leave consulting. So on our way back from one of the exec update meetings, the team I was working with, we were feeling really deflated. we actually turned to each other and we were like, so what do we do now? And it was at that moment that we decided to start a home care company. And so those two industry experts that I mentioned, they're actually now my co-founders. So we worked to fire ourselves really quickly because we believed that there was something still there. And we shared our intentions with the execs and the companies that this is what we were planning on doing. We got their blessing and we leveraged the insights and learnings to build what is version 1 of .care today. However, a few months into building .care, we ran up against the same challenges with the status quo. As an example, the patient referrals that are sent to us by a role called case managers. And everywhere else that they sent a referral, it was dealt with the old way, right? The old way felt familiar, it felt safe, whereas our tech-enabled, patient-directed platform felt really foreign and strange for some. And so as a young company, we decided to dive a lot deeper into that, understanding the circumstances of which our home care system was designed, including talking to retired healthcare execs and politicians who dedicated their whole lives to changing the industry. And we learned a lot of things. We heard about some incredible initiatives that came and went, the impact of historical contracts that was deemed too hard to undo, the lack of bandwidth to reorganize, and just the history of the industry's aversion to risk and the fear of risk. And so this is when we realized that if we were going to try to change the system here, we needed to detach the influence of status quo from what we were doing. So we needed to, essentially undesign, undo, enable people to say no to something that we were all used to doing. The challenge with all of that is that there is no playbook to this that I am aware of. If you know of any, please pop it in the chat. I would love to know. But one thing that we knew to be true is that we needed to plug into something more human, our values, our dreams, and just the world that we wish existed. So we took every action that we took, we took it with an extreme level of empathy because we were on a quest to really sort of uncover what really united us in this industry. So that meant every patient intake call, every email, every webinar, lunch and learn info session that we did. And turns out what really united us at the end was actually empathy itself and a shared conviction that difficult patient and staff situations needed to be met with empathy. And that we discovered that actually the shared enemy was what got in the way of that empathy. Because there are many functional components, right? Like in healthcare, it's like triage, coordination, billing systems that can enable and support or break down that empathy. And in the end, when these systems break down, the jobs that we all need to do as healthcare workers become saddled with this unnecessary weight, and we feel tired to our bones, and it actually stifles our capacity for empathy itself. So we asked ourselves, what would it mean to take back control of the systems that we relied on in order for empathy to be unleashed? So what would it mean to sort of undesign, undo, say no to in order to move forward in a new way? And for us, when we asked the question in that way, the answer became really clear. We needed to undesign the processes and structures that put pressure on frontline care workers to be paid such low wages. For context, in home care, the industry average is about $18 to $20 an hour, and there's 40% turnover every year. So because, unsurprisingly, one of the major blockers to having a capacity for empathy is stressing out whether or not you're going to be able to afford groceries for your family. And when we had this, aha moment, this realization, it felt like a really big statement, right? Like, our little company lifting the standard for what care workers get paid. And don't get me wrong, it totally is a big statement. And it took courage, boldness for us to even start to use those words. Especially for me, I identify as a woman who grew up with Chinese values, to be quiet, to fit in. So it's a big gulp to say no to status quo. Because for us, paying care workers a real living wage, even though what the market looked like and what the market was demanding and willing to provide at the time, we felt that it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to pay care workers a living wage. But not everyone felt that way. As an example, when we were raising our friends and family round, a lot of the investors that we started talking to asked questions like, but why pay so much more than the standard? Like they literally looked at us like I had a third arm coming out of my body. So we got a lot of no's, but for every couple dozen no's, there was a yes. And actually, eventually, some of the execs that we were working with in the consortium initially ended up becoming some of our early investors. And thankfully, we got enough yeses to get off the ground. So then we got to work. Like, okay, now we have a commitment to do this thing. Let's now do it. So we started asking ourselves, if we were to remove this one component in the home care process, could this potentially increase our ability to pay care workers more? We sort of asked that question for every part of the user experience. And so we kind of took away everything that we could, and we were incredibly intentional about what we added back and how it was added back. In the end, we realized that it was through technological improvements such as text message-based appointment setting, GPS tracking and validation, and real-time budget reporting that we were able to reduce the cost of care delivery by about actually 30%. And we still had the overarching goal from day one, which was having a more streamlined, personalized, and efficient home care experience. But then we took those savings and we decided to pay our care workers more than anyone else. And I can proudly say that today we pay $23 to $28 an hour, a real living wage. Because we can all agree that when we are less worried about putting food on the table, not only does the problem of status quo actually go away, but the quality of care, especially defined by the patient, increases. And especially in the COVID context, right? When these care workers are heroes, risking their own health and safety to take care of others in the community. Now, a couple of years later, we're proudly Canada's largest patient-directed home care provider with over 16,000 frontline workers who registered to be part of our community, paying nearly 25% over, quote unquote, what industry standard is. Definitely the most badass thing I've done in my life. But the crazy part of all of this for me, and the part that I think I'm still unpacking and processing, is that when you actually step into the courage of doing the thing that feels true and right for you and persist with seeing it through, even if it seems like everything else is saying no, the right people show up. As an example, we recently closed our pre-seed round for over 1.2 million under the banner of charge less, pay people more. I never thought that as a startup, you could raise money by saying charge less, pay people more. But yet every single investor who joined our recent round, they joined because they were also so confused about why the person caring for their loved one, their parent, their child with a disability, why they were paid a minimum wage in the first place. So now I choose to believe that there are people out there who are looking for an alternative option to status quo. And that with empathy, self-permission, connecting to our deep human self, and a bit of luck, that we can undesign these archaic systems that require us to undesign in order to unlock a more equitable future for all. So in closing, some takeaways for you in case you're curious about doing this within your own organizational or personal context. What I encourage you to do is start by just taking time to understand how we got here, right? And that includes the history, the people, and the circumstances in which what you're working on was designed. And if you can actually talk to those people, ask them about their stories, because you need to understand how status quo became status quo. Then from there, look at how the circumstances have changed to now. How has the world changed? And how has the people involved since then changed? At the most human level, look for what needs to be undesigned first in order to give you permission for the future that you need to build. And then boldly start by giving yourself the permission to explore that space of undoing. Because you're going to step on many, many toes and seek allies and peers inside and outside of your organization who are trying to do the same. And I'll leave you with one quote. It's from Adam Grant. It takes curiosity to learn. It takes courage to unlearn. Learning is how you evolve, and unlearning is how you keep up as the world evolves. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so
Wow.
much, Chenny.
Oh, wow.
That was
Oh my gosh.
incredible.
Let's give Chenny a round of applause. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. If you're interested, her links to her social media and her work, you can follow them and you can see that in the chat. But now we can move on to the Q&A. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
First and foremost, before we get into anything else, so badass. Literally, like you're saying, the whole premise of giving or providing a livable wage to those that literally keep us living shouldn't be a breakthrough egg mentality, but it really is. So I mean, thank you so much for providing for those who care for us. So again, if anyone has any questions, throw it in the chat or stick your hand up in the reactions. But let's start off with the question that I have. So you mentioned earlier that you spent a year planning and community building, but the project ended up getting gutted. When things don't pan out, how do you stay motivated and how do you keep your team motivated?
Yeah, I think you just have to connect to your purpose, right? Like your why, like, why am I here? Why am I doing any of this? Why did I sign up for this in the first place? And I think it's also giving yourself permission to talk about the fact that the moment you're in sucks, and that you're doing a really hard thing, that the chances of success are low. Like, I think it's okay to acknowledge that because it makes it easier. I felt that for me personally, that throughout our journey in the past collectively 3 years, that one of the hardest things was like just you beating up yourself, like you're kind of like your own worst critic,
right?
And really just sort of looking at the situation objectively, being like, yeah, this is hard. this makes sense that this would be this hard right now, and then connecting back to your purpose is how we sort of work on that.
Got it. Yeah, totally. It's one of those things that like I know I find myself coming back to like in the morning, and also at the end of the day, it's like like certain things didn't work out. So I reflect at the end of the day, like, you know what, I'm still pushing forward in the right direction, right? It's just there are a couple of bumps along the way, right? So
Yep.
Thank you so much. Another question that I have is, one of the things that you mentioned was to be more human and more empathetic, but how do you see that transferring over to say other industries? Because I know there's 72 folk in this call right now, and we all work in multiple different industries. So how do you feel like being human and empathetic transfers over to other industries?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that the context of history now is a really good time. I think that COVID has highlighted so many different areas of our world that require more equity, that require adjusting, and that now sort of it's shone a light on those areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that part of being in lockdown and part of essentially having a lot more time to reflect in the last couple of years, that I choose to believe that I think there's also a greater awareness as well of the types of problems that need to be solved. So yeah, I actually feel like there are more situations that need to be met with more empathy than not. Right. Like in every context, right? Like even right now, as an example, I was on a call last night with a few other founders, and we were talking about even just our supply chain and how the fact that even when we're having these supply chain issues, the first instinct that we do is we yell at people on the phone because the thing that we want is not there. Instead of meeting the situation with more empathy and understanding why is it in this COVID context, why is it that this thing is now broken? Mm-hmm. And if you go deep into it and keep unlayering the onion, you'll find that within all of this, there is this commonality, at least I find that there's this commonality of a need for belonging, a need for safety and security, a need for something that enables people to thrive. Right. In every industry.
God, that's so beautiful.
I want to piggyback on that question on empathy. I'm a product designer myself, and I also always try to work with solving user problems. And empathy is always brought up to the table, but we don't really talk much about like what are those ways in which we can grow empathy for our users. I just wanted to know like what ways do you think like we can connect more with the user, get more in tune with the problems, and just grow that empathy. So
yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think that as designers, right, like we're taught many different tools and methods to develop empathy. Like, for example, you can conduct research interviews, you can do workshops with diverse participants, you can do usability testing. But I think that one thing that we could spend a lot more time doing is not so much on the tools and effort side of things, but it's actually when it comes to our own biases. and what our own even beliefs are. I know that even for me personally, as just like as an example, with the especially with the Black Lives Matter movement, I had to question a lot about, am I really truly approaching this in the most empathetic way that I could? Are there any things that I was taught through my parents, not through ill intentions, but just through their own experiences and their own history that I am somehow now still attached to myself? And I think that through that inner questioning and asking, we'll find that actually we're all really pretty conditioned to believe things to be true in a certain way. But yeah, it takes
it takes a little bit of learning.
Yeah, and like I mean, like you know, obviously like tools, things like mindfulness, things like that also really help too, right? So,
Thank you.